Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only.
Well, on that note, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Super2. Joining me today is...
The Comics Kid 2099.
And the Comics Kid to Geek for Fun.
Yeah, there we go. He's a little out of practice. I just want to congratulate me because this is why I can't have nice things. I was a whole week ahead on Geeky Gentlemen, and then I failed 2 weeks in a row to get an episode recorded. So now I'm gonna be just caught up again. I'm gonna be like stretching to get these episodes out and stuff. So go me. Anyway, so this week we are discussing a topic that's, I mean, it's almost past at this point, which is great because, like any Geeky Gentleman topic, it'll be not timely at all. And we're going to talk about, I guess the name for it is fan outrage, but that sounds a lot more limited than or that's either bigger or more limited than I want it to be. Because I want to talk about fan outrage or fan reaction to a very specific thing, and particularly in comics. We can maybe branch out a little bit, talk movies and games and stuff, but I think it's the most potent in comics. I want to talk about fan outrage to things they don't like, whether or not those decisions have artistic merit. And so I don't know what the title for that is going to be, but the basic sentence that I came to for this is part of the juxtaposition that irks me so much about this. So the sentence is, comic books are art until they do something I don't like. And that is kind of what's really got me thinking about this, because this topic was kind of born in my head through all of just the negative response to the final issue of Tom King's Heroes in Crisis, and the way people talked about that, and also in the same breath the way that people will defend comic books as quote unquote legitimate media, as a true art form, even though a lot of supposedly high-minded people don't think of them that way. And so I want to talk about the interesting juxtaposition I see there. And I'm pretty sure we'll get a full episode out of it, even though it sounds like we shouldn't. So yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. So I don't know, do you guys have any general thoughts on the topic that we could use to kind of get started?
I think, just in general, there does seem to be it's really hard to talk about this sometimes without coming off like a pretentious asshole. And I'm British, so that's kind of my default, so I have to try even harder not to sound like that. But there is a thing where we get people approach comics in a general sense, and I guess you could say it's for most media, but specifically comics tends to be it's more niche, and so people like to pretend they're reading deeper than they actually are for a lot of things. Like a good example is people hold up Hush as one of the greatest Batman stories. And if you've actually gone through Batman comics and looked at some of the things that have been explored in Batman comics and the things writers and artists have used Batman comics to talk about, you realize how bare bones Hush is and how something like that, which is just generic action mystery story with Jim Lee art looking gorgeous, like it makes you understand a bit more. Okay, this is the perspective a lot of people are looking at when they think of great comics, I guess. This isn't a slate at anyone who enjoys those books. I think that's fine. I think it's more so there is a certain outlook people have for what they want in terms of comic book fans and how like DC and Marvel advertise those things, rather than what creators who want to branch out for things want to. A good go-to example would be how DC tried to market something like Final Crisis, where it was very much Grant Morrison as like a normal event comic, a blockbuster people could pick up, whereas Grant Morrison was doing a very specific deconstruction with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I find particularly troubling, because it's hard. I don't want to make this just a video about Heroes in Crisis specifically because I didn't reread it for this, and I don't want to really get into my thoughts about the series, but like something that has actively annoyed me throughout all of King's tenure at DC so far is they've just done a shit job marketing his books, just everywhere. The war of jokes and riddles is this huge summer event. No, it's much more introspective, and there aren't big action scenes and stuff. The wedding of Batman and Catwoman is going to be a huge thing that's going to affect the DC universe forever. But then it ends the way it does, and it's anticlimactic if you were expecting it to end as... It's fucking spoilers. If you were expecting them to get married like DC was essentially promising you, then it ends very anticlimactically and is very disappointing. But if you'd been reading the run to that point, did anyone actually reading the run not see that shit coming? Come on. It was built into how the run was working at that point. And so like there's these... And then Heroes in Crisis is pretty much the same thing. I've got DC Nation number 2 or 3 where they're like, two of these heroes will die and 2 of them will be accused of murder. Okay, but the book's about heroes dealing with mental anguish. Can we maybe focus on that part to market it instead of one of these characters you love is going to die? So it's like the marketing behind the series was terrible to begin with, and then once the series started, that's all people could focus on. So I don't even know who to blame at that point. Maybe DC was right to market that one of these characters was going to die because, I mean, shit, it was the part people seemed to actually care about. So yeah, I think the marketing's good. Ruben, what are your general thoughts on the topic?
Well, as far as fan reaction or like poor marketing?
Just the general topic we're discussing today.
Well, I'm probably going to be I guess somewhat the odd man out here. A lot of times I'll see like a overwhelming negative reaction towards something, and a lot of people will then rail against the negative reaction and say, how dare you, do this, do that. And my thought is like, I don't see it as a huge deal. Like this, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when Game of Thrones ended and everyone wanted to sign a petition to redo the series. Mm-hmm. And of course that's really dumb because they're not going to redo the series. And I don't think anyone who signed the petition actually thought that they would redo the series. I would be very surprised if someone legitimately thought that was an option. But I think what happened there, I think people wanted to show in the most extreme way that they could just how disappointed they were with that series and how it ended. And you look at like, comic books. I didn't read Heroes in Crisis, but I have had moments where you're reading a comic month to month, and comics are not cheap. Like it racks up. If you buy one comic a month, that's gonna add up. And most people buy several books a month. 5 or 6 monthly comics a month. And so if something is not going the way you want it to, you're gonna voice your opinion. And some people comic book creators are going to say, well, fans don't really. I've seen people. I was reading a book recently where it was talking about negative fan reaction whenever McG was going to be doing the Superman movie, Superman Flyby, and like a lot of fans had huge negative reactions when the script leaked. And somebody said, fans don't know what they're talking about. They don't know. They wouldn't be able to make a movie if you gave them the resources to do it. Like just because you have a love for the character doesn't mean you know anything about making a movie. And to an extent, I agree with that. But also, you're paying for the product. You have a right to voice your vote. Effectively, if you're buying Heroes in Crisis for 6 months, you're voting for it with your wallet. And so if you don't like it, then you have you paid for it. So you should be able to say, no, I didn't like this. Now, I would say also, Heroes in Crisis ended almost a month ago?
Mm-hmm.
So if people are still whining about it now, I would say find a different thing to complain about. But I'm pretty mellow when it comes to outrage at things in pop culture. I used to get so upset at stuff in movies and TV shows and books that I was reading, and now I don't want to make it sound like people who do get upset are immature, because I really don't want to come off that way. But for me personally, now that I have a job and I have other responsibilities that I didn't have when I was in high school, that kind of thing doesn't bother me anymore. So now, if I'm not enjoying Batman, I'm just going to stop reading Batman.
Mm-hmm. I think you're really touching on something, which is, dude, I read all the way through Secret Empire, written by Nick Spencer. That's the Captain America as a Nazi run, right? Uh-huh. And I was like, man, this is really, really bad. I don't do this as a big shock value thing. I just think this book is legitimately this bad, and I ripped the cover on review and everything to express my negative opinions about the book. And then I decided I was going to be there for the whole run. I wanted to see how he was going to end it because I didn't think he could pull it off. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. It gets really, really dumb. But once it was done, I was kind of over it, and I decided, no, I'm probably not going to read any Nick Spencer stuff anymore. I gave him a really good fair shot. He impressed me early on, and he couldn't pull it off. He let me down, so I'm just done with this stuff. And that was my opinion, and I don't even know the last time I talked about Nick Spencer outside of that exact example. I've given that exact example a number of times, but I don't go and, send Nick Spencer mean messages on Twitter or anything like that. I don't, constantly make fun of his work or anything. I'm just kind of done with him because I didn't like it. So I voiced my opinion on the run, and I moved on. The thing for me, though, is that when this fan outrage tends to build up, the response isn't measured. Because, you brought up the good point of, you paid for it. You do have a right to voice your opinion on it. It's one of the few things you can do when you're reacting to a piece of art. So I'm going to go with the Game of Thrones thing. Yeah, it is... I finally finished that show, and I understand that people aren't going to like the decisions made with some of the characters. I get it, but at the same time, it doesn't have to end the way you want it to for it to be good. These things need to be looked at in and of themselves, aside from your hopes, your expectations. Because that's the real problem that I have, is it's not a matter of, oh, this thing is objectively bad, here are the reasons why most of the time with this outrage reaction. It's this oh, this didn't do what I wanted it to, so therefore it's not good. And that's the part that really, really ticks me off, is it's not a thing's responsibility to give you what you want. It's just not, like, and that's kind of the point where you get to, like, not giving you everything you want, kind of giving you what maybe you need, is something that's worthwhile and has kind of a higher value to it, in my opinion. So the Game of Thrones thing, for example, does anyone here care about Game of Thrones spoilers?
Nope.
No.
All right. So season 8 of Game of Thrones ends with Daenerys Targaryen, who had kind of been portrayed as like the heroine of the series to a certain point. You know, the only character pretty much always making the right call or the morally right decision. You know, she killed slave owners and stuff like that. You know, she decides, no, the only just thing to do is to burn this entire city to the ground with my dragon. Like, civilians, soldiers, all of them, I'm just going to burn them all alive. And people really don't like that, and they got really upset by that. And the whole point of the last episode is, or the whole point of that episode and the final episode is, hey, it turns out the super charismatic person who, like, had always been doing these things that were, like, kind of questionable for the time, but really revolutionary and fit with our modern, quote-unquote, sensibilities about things. Yeah, it turns out maybe that's not the best kind of person to put your faith in, because at that point they become so self-assured that they can justify anything, like genocide of just people. And that's what happens. And so, like, the whole thing after that is about providing a check, a balance on power. Not going with someone just because you think they're a good person at the time, because you never know what they could do. That's a really interesting and valuable lesson to consider. Despite how you feel about, oh, this ruins her character, or oh, her character would never do this, those are things you could debate about. But no one's talking about that side of things. They're all just focusing on the, oh, she shouldn't have done that. Her and Jon Snow should have gotten married and had babies that were flying on dragons too, and they should have, established a kingdom that was going to be just forever and ever.
See,
No.
I'm not seeing hardly any of that. Maybe you and I are just on, like, totally different ends of the internet, but, like, I would say 85% of the complaints I've seen have been really valid complaints. Like, it's not that people are complaining that it happened, because I was seeing, to talk about Game of Thrones, like years ago, like 3 years ago at least, I was seeing people theorize that Dany would go insane and would become, air quotes, the Mad Queen. So I don't think people had a problem with that. I think people had a problem with how it happened, in that it happens in the span of seconds when it should have been led up to over the course of, like, a season. People just didn't like the handling of it, not necessarily the plot itself. They just didn't like how it was delivered. That's how I'm seeing almost everyone complain about it. I haven't seen people complain like that, like what you were saying.
Well, Ruben, I get. You can go ahead, Ian.
I've seen a bit of both, but go ahead, Alfie.
So, like, my response to that would be is going off you agree with the plot, but you just think it was a bit rushed. Does that still warrant the degree of reaction of fan petitions that you hate it so much? Like, surely that, therefore, if people have that opinion, you'd have a much more measured response. Is, oh yeah, this season wasn't the best because it was kind of rushed, but it got where I wanted to go in the end. Like that I guess I'm failing to see why that would be such an outrage if people didn't want it to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing for me, is just like, even there's that, and then there's, like, really nitpicky shit, like, tropes aren't the worst thing ever, and you can have a problem with a specific trope, but I think it's unfair to hold a trope against a thing, because it's really hard to write something without any dependency on tropes whatsoever, and usually when you do, you end up with some weird ass shit like Eraserhead. So like, again, Game of Thrones. Oh, it's such a problematic and disgusting trope for a man to do a heroic sacrifice and stab the woman he loves. I'm like, is that really such a widespread specific problem? Like, even if you can name several examples where it happens, I'm really pressed to see like what the messaging is there. Oh, I'm killing this person that I love and it's so traumatic. Okay, so what do we got here? $1 Million Baby.
X-Men Last Stand.
X-Men Last Stand, okay. Like, is it so widespread that like you can think of like maybe 5 examples and it's this huge problem then? I don't know. I'm sure there are other examples. Someone would probably make me a list if they took their time on it, but is that such a widespread problem that is that really the problem with those films? It's like, oh, $1 Million Baby. It was such a good film until he killed her. Yeah, but I mean, like, that's the traumatic and tragic part of it, though. That's like what makes it sad. It'd be just as sad if it were a woman doing it to a man. I'm pretty sure I could start to think of examples from that side of things too, to be fair. Okay. Titanic. She lets him go. Fucking drowns. That's hateful. That's I'm secretly been a men's rights activist this whole time. Women and children first, my ass. The men should get to go first.
Jesus.
No, but like seriously, like, okay, Titanic. The reverse of the trope exists, and it's just like it's a trope of tragedy of like this person that loves this other person having to hurt them or kill them, for their own good or for the good of others, kind of thing. I mean, it's sad. It's a trope because it's effective, and I don't see why that becomes such a huge problem for the thing. It just, again, it's art. It's like I guarantee if I go through years of the Twitter feed from the person that complained about Jon Snow stabbing Daenerys, I can find tweets about Game of Thrones where they're like, man, this is such a good show. I love this show so much. It's so well done. The acting, the set design, everything's so perfect. But the second it does something they don't like, oh, this is bad now. No, it's like you're allowed to dislike it. That's fine, but it doesn't have to give you what you want for it to be good. Like there is value to things going wrong for these characters you like. I mean, shit, it's Game of Thrones, right? That was like the show's whole thing for the longest time. I'm talking too much.
No, I feel like you're getting on a good point here, which kind of leads into maybe a distinction I feel like we should 100% clarify. Is like, I do think there is a difference, and a difference a lot of people need to kind of get on more, between outrage and critique. Is where you can critique something, you can disagree with something, and you cannot like a thing, but you can respect that thing had a take, but you can still think that take was awful or hot shit. But as long you still respect it as okay, this person was doing something, I think he did it terribly or bad kind of thing. But then that's different from being this has ruined my characters forever, you've doomed them forever. My example for that is always going to be Zack Snyder's DC films. Is I think Batman vs Superman is a hot mess. I think Man of Steel is meh, with some problematic elements in it. But they didn't ruin Superman for me. They didn't ruin Batman for me. It was just I base idea. I'm not opposed. It's not what I would want. I would want cosmic Superman who's also down to earth, champion of the oppressed, mix of both. That's my ideal. But he obviously was never going to do that. He wanted to do a first contact kind of real examination of Superman's impact on the world thing. I think that's fine. You can tell that story. That is a story worth telling. I don't have the issue with that. I have the issue with the execution and all the shit involved with those films. I'm not going to do a review of them there. But I think that is a good example of, on both sides of that camp, is you have people who will critique it endlessly purely for the fact that Batman shoots people, but not like how that affects people in the story of like BVS and why that doesn't work for that. But just on the principle of the thing, I guess, is where I'm going, because I feel that does kind of, like, if Batman shoots someone in a story, but it's like a really well-told story, I think that's fine, just because it doesn't change how I view Batman.
Final
I still think
Crisis.
I still think Batman shouldn't shoot people, but you can make exceptions if you do it really good. It's just harder to work at.
Dark Knight Returns is probably the better example of that.
Yeah, it's the same there as well. There's those examples you have where characters doing actions shouldn't be necessarily prohibited because a character is a malleable thing for a story, and putting them in a different story means they'll change to adapt to that. So Superman doing something in that doesn't bother me. Lois Lane doing something that doesn't bother me. Like a new Lex Luthor take doesn't bother me. I feel like people who attack those films for that just give that Snyder cult like more ammunition to defend it than they probably should have, because that is a legitimate defense of people attacking it strictly because it isn't Donna Superman, but then people attacking every other like the CW Superman because it is a Cavill Superman, and people get so attached to these iterations of characters that I think goes closer to your comics point. Like I don't like a thing if this isn't like this, is comic book fans are so attached, despite all their preaching about characters being multiversal and being able to be in different medias, they're so attached to specific characterizations of characters. Like anything that deviates from 616 Spider-Man, people will annihilate. Like motherfuckers will not stop. If they like, that's why the Homecoming Bash fandom has like come then, because there's so every different little thing that's different from 616 Peter is therefore why this film is going to be bad kind of idea. And I feel that's a very comic centric idea. Like you don't see that happening with Sherlock Holmes fans that often.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point of the attachment to a character. And like, you know, I'm trying to think of an example of something where something took a character I really loved and just did such a poor fucking job with them that it's not even worth the effort. Man, does anyone got a good one besides BVS?
Well, I mean, BVS is a really good one for me. But I would say, I mean, I can name a whole lot of stories featuring, like, you know, if we want to keep it in comics, like featuring Batman or Superman that I just think are just a hot mess. But I don't know if it's, I can't think of one where it's just like, yeah, this ruined it for me.
Well, no, like something where you think, give me a hot mess example. Something where it's like, this is just not this character whatsoever.
Okay, it was a Neil Adams story called Batman Odyssey.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, it had like, I mean, he goes underground and there's dinosaurs and there's like, it's not, I mean, there's a good portion of it that involves Batman like with a gun, and like that was a problem. But I guess for me, that one, maybe that's not the best example, because that's not so much that, I mean, I don't think Neil Adams had a great grip on the character, but I think that one was more that it was just the story itself was nonsensical and made no sense. But
I think I've got one.
Okay, yeah.
Joker by Brian Azzarello.
Okay.
And Lee Bermejo doing the art on that. I fucking hate that story. I think it's terrible. Just as a fan of the Joker, I think the Joker is so out of character in that book that you literally could call it anything else, have Lee Bermejo draw a different guy, and it's a completely different Batman book. It's so not the Joker. It really, really irks me. Like, to see the Joker, like, in Harley's arms, legitimately crying, is the, like, most non-Joker image I could ever visualize. Like, okay, I'm not gonna say the Joker's too manly to cry or anything. I think he's not human enough to cry, but even if he was gonna, it'd be in Batman's arms. Like, I can't see it anywhere else, and that's me being very, like, guarded of the character, of like why I think this is not a good book from a perspective of someone who likes the Joker. Like, if someone were to ask me, hey Ian, I want to get into the Joker, and I heard about this Brian Azzarello, Lee Bermejo comic where the art looks really, really good, should I go read that? I'd say no, because it has nothing to do with the character whatsoever. There's maybe like one good scene that's very Joker-ish, and the rest is kind of trash to me. But at the same time, if you're not trying to get into the character, if you just want like a really, really gorgeous, kind of gritty, realistic crime book with supervillain and Batman in it, yeah, you could probably read Joker. It doesn't have a problem as a story being executed, but I distinctly dislike it because of its take on the character being, in my opinion, so off from what makes the Joker. And a lot of people will tell me, oh, well, it's an Elseworld story, so it's fine. I'm like, no, the fact that it's an Elseworld story makes it worse. Because that means more people are going to go to that and think that's the Joker, and it's not. And that kind of bugs me. But it's not a problem with the story itself. I'm not going to hold the story itself to account for that. I'm going to, when I criticize that, it's criticizing it as a story about the Joker, because I don't think it's about that character.
Right. I guess just to shoot this at you, Ian, because I think you're at a good point, and I want to ask you this question: that's the closest I can feel in terms of how you've been describing this to how I see people describing like the Heroes in Crisis confessionals for what they dislike. I guess, do you feel like there is like a line or some? It's so hard to measure these things, but like, how far do you think that should go in terms of this is not this character and people shouldn't take this as like like, because that can get so interpretive for characters. Like the Joker's been so many different things. Like, we're both Joker fans and we both kind of like the same kind of stuff, but I'm sure if we got down to like really meeting different, we would probably have two different views on the character still. So I think it's interesting to try and like, what is it purely personal, or is there some kind of objectiveness to what defines the character?
Okay, so like, to use the Heroes in Crisis one that just popped all over my fucking timeline is going to be the Hal Jordan one, where, all right, so here's the scene. It's just a panel of Hal Jordan saying, "Let's be honest, I don't even know what will is. Do you?" That's it. That's all he says. It's like 2 sentences and a question. And everyone is all over that. Everyone is just, like, from the Green Lantern fandom, is just on that for like a week straight, just tearing into it. And the one that really irked me was people would post that panel, and then they'd post images of Hal Jordan doing all these very willful, great things where he summons up all his will and pushes through and saves the day kind of thing. All these really famous Hal Jordan comes in and does a good moments. And they're like, Hal Jordan doesn't know what will is, excuse you, and using those as their examples. And I'm like, okay, so you don't know what will is then, because that's not an example of will. That's an example of Hal Jordan being victorious. And that's the thing that irked me, is like, this, the argument's in bad faith to begin with, so that's enough of a problem. But even ignoring that, it's not a critique of the thing being stated. It's getting so attached to the character, so attached to the piece, that you're not even willing to think about what the piece is trying to say outside of the character. That's where I think the line gets drawn. If you're just not willing to look at the thing itself and you're just judging it as good or bad based solely on, is this my version of the character? Is this the character that I love? That's where I think the distinction comes in. Because again, I think Joker's a bad book if you're looking for a Joker story. If someone came up to me and said, Ian, I don't really like the Joker, but I heard about this Brian Azzarello book, and it's supposed to be like this really gritty crime drama thing, and you know, kind of realistic world that I'm really interested in. Is that something good to read? I'd be like, yeah, you'll be fine. If you're not into the Joker, you'll be fine. I might tell him the caveat to it is it's not the Joker, but you'll be fine. Like, I'm not going to tell people not to read Joker because it's not a good book or not a well-told story or not a beautiful book. God, that's actually the thing that annoys me about that book is it looks so good.
Yeah, Brian Azzarello somehow has like the craziest power to fucking get the best art for his subpar stories most of the time.
I know. So like that's the thing for me is when your critique is so focused on your personal attachment that it's not willing to consider the piece itself. Okay, good episode. Everyone, thanks very much for watching.
No, I think that's like spot on. There's only so many places you can like identify, okay, this is where I'm like really attached and I don't like this, but I recommend it to someone because I think it's a lot of it does come down to we're generalizing because obviously we're not going to call people out or anything, but like most people I see on Twitter who have like these hot takes are like retweets. I don't even know them personally, like, or anything. I don't know who these guys. These could be perfectly lovely people, but I don't want to like come across thing, but it does seem like because this is from my personal experience, so people can call me out on this shit. I'm not calling anyone else out. Is when I was much younger in the comic fandom, I did this a lot more myself, so I understand where people are coming from to that extent. I've been like, I would go and like when Dan Slott blocked me, I was like, yay. Like that kind of petty shit that gets no one anywhere, but like I was like it's just one of those things where like you for some reason see when you're in that immature mindset and you're like attached to the character and you're in a fandom where the more you know, the more you're like praised for it, and like you get deeper and deeper into it, and you get a sense of superiority, like, oh, I've read so and so many comics, so therefore I have the better understanding than like I see that all the time with people. Is like the standard like nerd critique of like other nerds is, oh, you're a so and so fan, have you read like all these endless like obscure shit that of course no one's fucking read, no one cares about like Chuck Dixon, like that kind of shit is like people will do that and then they'll think they do, then they'll start doing it to creators. Like that Green Lantern tweet was also like, Tom King, maybe you should read the Green Lantern comic. Like the fucking audacity with that like kind of mentality.
First of all, he wrote one. Second of all, he says Hal Jordan is one of his favorite characters in comics.
Like, it's just one of those things where I understand it because, dudes, I fucking did it. But at the same time, I don't know. When I did it, I was like 14, 15. Like, that kind of age where you're so
like last week? Zing!
Yeah, basically. So, I've had a fucking busy week, man. Let's calm me down. Daddy needs a rest. But first, let me finish my point, Zingaruna. We're going to, like, such extremes that I don't know. I see people doing it so much, and it's just not healthy as a fan to keep going after them as like villainizing creators, I guess is the word. And that happens a lot in comics. Like, just even getting off Tom King for a second, people have that people hate Dan DiDio, and like he's not my favorite guy in the world as well, but like people really fucking hate this guy.
Yeah, they totally fucking do. And it's crazy because, you know, he's definitely made some decisions I don't agree with, but at the same time, he's kind of in the background responsible for some stuff I really fucking love. Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp wouldn't be doing the Green Lantern without Dan DiDio.
He got Grant Morrison to do All-Star.
Yeah, Tom King wouldn't have done Mr. Miracle without Dan DiDio. Like that, the Tom King has talked about it, where they were at a bar together at a con, and he goes, "Man, I really like Vision. I wish you could do a Vision series at DC." And Tom King says, Give me a list of characters I can use. And that's how we got Mr. Miracle. That, I mean, like, seriously, you know, say what you will about Dan DiDio, he's made a lot of decisions that I think are bad. You know, say what you will about Heroes in Crisis. I think the editorial mandate of, okay, but we need something to sell it, so let's kill a character and let's have another character be the murderer. That's very obviously like kind of a mandate in the story, and it definitely feels the most awkward as you read the thing. But try to read around it, god damn it. It's really interesting. Who's the other guy? Is it Joe Quesada over at Marvel? Yeah. You know, the Peter Parker and Mary Jane selling their wedding to the devil is a really fucking stupid idea. But like when you hear the argument behind it of, well, Peter Parker is a young character, and as he's getting older and becoming like a teacher, and he's married to a supermodel and all this stuff, he's losing that relatability to younger readers. I don't agree with that necessarily, but I see where he's coming from at least. That's not an unreasonable argument. And so those things kind of, I don't know, it gets weird, right?
Yeah, one of the things I'll like point out, this will be like, people could like sound clip this, is, alright, I want to say a good thing that came out of One More Day. Here's your fucking like real thing of why Outrage can sometimes be overblown. Okay, so One More Day was awful storyline, awful reasoning behind it. But the shit that came after with like Brand New Day, like revitalized the Spider-Man books after Civil War. Like got tons of new artists on the book, and it looked gorgeous. That much better than it had in years. It made Joe Quesada, he had a different view on Spider-Man than I did, but he fucking pushed him for that view he had, and it put the character in a place to conquer the mainstream of Marvel that he had kind of been dwelling in a little bit, like during the sides of like the late mid 2000s. Like he hadn't really been at that peak, but then the moment Brand New Day happened, he just like became much more accessible for new readers, because if people felt it was a jumping on point for, like, again, for Marvel, it's fucking rare to have like reboot-esque things, so people jumped on, oh, a Spider-Man reboot, I can go into Spider-Man with no continuity, fucking yes. Like people were begging for that shit, and I think that was a good outcome of a bad decision. And I think people need to like even now, I don't agree with the creative team on it, but fucking a Wally West solo book that people have been asking for years is happening because of Heroes in Crisis. Again, a Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn solo book is happening because of Heroes in Crisis. All shit people wanted that probably wouldn't have happened without it.
Ruben, you've been kind of quiet for a while. What do you think about that? About decisions you disagree with from creative leading to bigger and better things? I mean, you've got to have something with the X-Men, right?
Yeah. You know, Grant, are either of you interested in reading Grant Morrison's new X-Men run?
Eventually, but I don't mind spoilers on that one.
Oh, okay,
it's been out long enough. That's kind of my fault.
There's a character introduced early in the run called Zorn, and then you find out towards the end of the run, this is actually Magneto in disguise, that he created this secret identity to infiltrate the X-Men and take them apart from within. And reading the comics, it really feels like he just kind of came up with that at the last minute. Like, it just comes completely out of nowhere. But he wrote this crazy long document called the Morrison Manifesto, where he was talking about all the stuff he wanted to accomplish with the X-Men, and how, like, he wanted it to be more streetwise, more like, you know, the Matrix and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like, you know, these cool, hip superheroes, modern, non-comic superheroes. But, like, and in the Morrison Manifesto, he reveals Zorn, who at the time, I think he was calling him like Prisoner X or something. Zorn is Magneto. So that's something he had planned from the very beginning. Eventually, his Magneto actually takes over New York City and is like herding human beings into these giant shipping containers to like kill them in a Holocaust-style genocide. And no one liked that. Everyone, even Grant Morrison fans, said, no, this is stupid because this is not what Magneto is about. Magneto was a victim of the Holocaust, so he would not create another one. And Grant Morrison argued, no, Magneto is a terrorist. And like he said that Chris Claremont, over the course of the 1980s, trying to rehabilitate Magneto and turn him into an ally of the X-Men, he said that was a mistake, and that spat in the face of the character. And so that was a really weird example where he ends that run by killing off Magneto, and then immediately, like literally the very next month, two separate writers are both retconning that, trying to like, oh no, here's what happened. The real Magneto was over here. That was just a guy who like thought he was the real Magneto. And I'm personally, I prefer Magneto to not be an antagonist of the X-Men, because I think that there's more interesting stuff you can do with him as a former adversary who's now trying to seek a new path. But that him doing that really kicked in everyone else into like, oh wait, we've got to get off our butts and try and fix, do some damage control here. And so for a little while, Magneto was back to being kind of an ally of the X-Men, sort of, and then it's gone to varying degrees of like he's sort of with them, he's kind of against them now. And so I would say that's one. Like, if he hadn't done that, because he air quotes killed Magneto at the beginning of his run, and that was kind of a big running theme, was that the X-Men or the world is evolving past Charles Xavier and Magneto's ideals, and like we're past that, we're ready for something new. And so if he hadn't done that, if he had ended his run and just didn't, Zorn is a good guy, he's not Magneto in disguise, if he had just ended it like that, who knows when Magneto would have been brought back to life. It might have taken years for somebody to say, let's bring Magneto back. But because he did that, immediately people were like, no, let's fix this, let's do something different. And so I guess that's one. Like, I did not like the way Magneto was handled there, but I did like some of the stuff, not all of it, but some of the stuff that was done with Magneto in the aftermath.
I think that's fair. Like, there can be a choice with a character that you disagree with, but because other people disagree with it, it leads to bigger and better things for that character who had been, like, spinning their wheels for a while, right? Like, God, I'm trying to think of another good example of that happening. Alfie, you got anything?
I've got one to ask Ruben, because I'm curious what he thinks of this, because I think it's one that was handled poorly, and I haven't been done with much, but I think it's one that was needed just to kind of update things and to make the X-Men feel more diverse, as there probably should be. Ruben, how do you feel about Iceman being gay?
I don't have a problem with it. A lot of people, I actually did a video a few weeks ago, it's probably a couple of months ago now, just pretty much like 20 minutes of me ranting and raving about how much I hated Bendis's X-Men run. And that was a thing that the problem I had was, if you just read Bendis's X-Men run, it came completely out of nowhere. But if you go back to the 90s and the 80s, there are tons of hints that Iceman is gay. And I didn't have a problem with that reveal. But to me, I feel like Bendis did it with, I don't think he was doing it with the best of intentions. I think he was doing it to drum up, like, hey, look at me, Iceman is gay now. I said this in my video, if he wanted to create a positive gay icon, he should have revealed that Iceman was gay in the first, third of his run. But he did it in, the second to last issue of his run and didn't explore what this meant for old Iceman and young Iceman. And I think what he should have done was, if he was going to do this, he should have committed to it. He should have done it much earlier in the run, and then he could have explored what this meant for Iceman. But instead, he just kind of threw it out there and then walked out the room and left it for other writers to develop. And I've just kind of dipped my feet in X-Men post-Bendis. I haven't read a lot of, Jeff Lemire's Extraordinary X-Men or Dennis Hopeless's All New, which is where Iceman was showing up after that. And so I don't know how much it's explored. They haven't gone back and they haven't undone that. But I do think if he wanted to do, I'm going to take this character and I'm going to do this thing with him and it's going to be a good thing, progressive and all that, he did it in the wrong way.
Yeah, but my thing is as well, is I think that's a good point because, like you say, he did it in the wrong way. From what you're telling me, he obviously didn't give the attention it deserved. Like a core founding member of the X-Men having such a drastic change that probably should be explored to get some powerful stories out of it. Like who knows, the X-Men dealing with social issues? Fuck, maybe we should get more of that. But I also feel like sometimes to get changes like that, and people complain about stuff like this a lot with, I'm struggling to think of examples, but it is like whenever a character's race will get changed in like a movie when they get cast or something, like Heimdall or the Zendaya as MJ, like that kind of shit. People will always complain about it as forced diversity or like people doing that. And my response to that, and then some outrage comes from that from like much less like the worst kind of fans, like the ones we've been talking about are fine to an extent, just kind of maybe to calm down. The ones who complain about that like are the worst kind of, normally at least. But there's a reason why that has to happen, is because we're dealing with groups of characters that are never going away. They're never going, like people will say, oh, we just make new characters. The new characters don't stick around a lot unless they're really fucking like one in a million. You have to, if you're gonna make sustainable like permanent change, you have to do it to the core cast, because those are the ones that are sticking around just because of how comic culture is. So I'm 100% like, yeah, you probably should be changing changes like the X-Men of all people, who are meant to represent all these kind of different metaphors for outcasts and marginalized people in society. Like these motherfuckers need to be at the cutting edge of this, and they're not. So Bendis doing that, I feel, is he's a creator with a lot of push. He's a creator with a lot of pull. Maybe he had to fight Marvel on that, and that's why it took him so long to get to it. I don't know the behind the scenes, but I think doing that, even if it was haphazard, I think sometimes it's for how comics work. Sometimes you do have to throw in some rush shit to get better end results. Like, again, I love the Spider-Man marriage. It was a publicity stunt. They did it purely as like a cash grab. They had no, and they immediately tried to undo it afterwards for like the next 30 fucking years.
Ian, I had a question for you. Hal Jordan exterminating the Green Lantern Corps in the 1990s, and then about 10 years later, Jeff Johns revealing that it was actually an alien that had possessed Hal Jordan, and it wasn't Hal's fault. What did you think of all of that?
Okay, so that's a really interesting example, because Emerald Twilight, for all its faults, is a really well-told mandate. Like, that is very much, the book's not selling, Hal Jordan isn't interesting, we need a new Green Lantern, we've done it twice already, so we need to really, like, push and change the whole fucking mythos. So you know what? Ron Mars, make Hal Jordan evil, kill him off in a big event, we're getting a new Green Lantern, give us your pitch. And so Ron Mars creates Kyle Rayner and does his best to give Hal Jordan a reason to be evil. Coast City's fucking annihilated in just a mess, and Hal Jordan's literally broken by it. Like that. God, it's downstairs. I wish I could go grab Emerald Twilight right now, because it's just like it opens with Hal Jordan just sitting in the crater that was Coast City. And it's like, it's so dark. I'm trying to remember the narration. Hal Jordan now sits in a crater of Earth, a crater that was once his city, and now it's nothing, just like him. And he's like, his fucking arm's broken, and it's in a construct cast. Like, everything about that has the weight it should. That would break anybody.
We all feel Reader Death of Superman.
Right? that has a lot of pathos to it. And so Hal Jordan going off and becoming evil well, hold on, I'm actually skipping the most important part. So it's not like he's just like, oh, Coast City's destroyed, guess I'm a villain now. It's like he's sitting there with it and he goes, the ring can make anything. All I need to do is will it to happen, and it will. And so he remakes Coast City as a construct with the people and his dad, who was already dead. And so you really begin to see this is a very, very sharp mental slip of this character. And that's all in issue 1. And then right at the end of issue 1, the Guardians appear from the ring, cancel out his construct of Coast City, and tell him, you're not a Green Lantern anymore, you just abused your power. Because he was so close to making it happen. Again, he lost everything, he almost had it back. The level of roller coaster trauma on that point. Again, it's definitely a mandate. There's obviously a lot of stuff going on in the background of it. But I defy anyone to tell a story that feels that real, given the circumstances that Ron Morris was handed.
Mm-hmm.
That's my argument for Emerald Twilight. All right, so then you skip a couple years and we get to Jeff Johns. So it was all an alien, and Hal Jordan's innocent is a huge mischaracterization of Jeff Johns' run on Green Lantern, and that is one of the really unfortunate and most important things that is left out about Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run. At no point in the run is Hal redeemed for what he did as Parallax. Very, very importantly, Parallax did not make Hal kill the Core. Parallax was able to get into Hal, and he helped him kill the Core. He was there kind of like whispering in his ear. He was not in full control of Hal until after the Core was already dead.
Okay.
So like that is something Jeff Johns revealed when he created the Parallax Sphere entity. It was not a, I slipped into you and I did all this. No, it was all Hal, and he had Parallax whispering in his ear. But Hal Jordan at no point is ever forgiven for it or anything. There's no point at which it's like, Hal, you finally made up for it. It's all about Hal just trying to do his best again. And that's what makes that run really interesting. So yeah, I think Green Lantern's a terrific example of like an editorial mandate that gave me my favorite Green Lantern, though. Not even, excluding John's run, Kyle Rayner's still the best Green Lantern, and we wouldn't have it without Emerald Twilight. But I think Emerald Twilight's still a well-told story.
And doesn't that... I didn't even think about this before you guys mentioned it, but like just hearing you describe that, Ian, isn't that just like beat for beat Heroes in Crisis Wally West?
Yes.
Like, to the T. Like, same thing. King comes with a story. I got a murderer, a hero who makes a mistake, not even a murderer, it's a hero who makes a mistake and loses control for a second, and two people who get blamed from it. DC's like, okay, so the two people that blamed are going to be Harley Quinn and Booster Gold, and the person who killed them was Wally West. Here, go make a story out of that. And he's like, oh shit, okay, I've got to somehow justify Wally West, of all people, losing control and having this split thing. So what he does is he kind of calls out Rebirth. A lot of fans who argue against Tom King and just creators in general, like Bendis and everything, seem to be under the impression that they're ruining everything John set up with Rebirth, is the common argument I use. That, oh, Rebirth was everything was great and happy, and now it's gone to shit. Rebirth was not all great and happy. It had a lot of shit still going on and kind of some empty promises. And the fact that fans got Wally West, who was in a perfectly content, like, he'd had his time, like, post-crisis, like, Wally West had a family and he was happy in that universe. Like, that universe was not wiped out. It still existed in the New 52, like, era kind of thing, in the multiverse, at least. These fans clamor to get old Wally West back. They don't want the new one, they want the old one back. DC brings in. Tom King calls out the fact, bringing someone from the happy ending into a new darker world where all their family is dead as a result of their mentor changing the timeline for his own selfish reasons, kind of fuck up a guy. But no, it's okay, because Wally West, you're hope, you're good, you represent all the good, so therefore it's going to be alright. No, like legit, that is so fucked up when you really take a look at it, but because it's comics, no one mentions it. Tom King decides to poke that and say, no, Wally West deserves better than this. Let's actually see what that would do to a guy. And you get the same kind of thing with Hal Jordan. It's like, if anything will legitimately cause someone to like just have a breakdown, not even like it was a split second for the Flash. And that's like ridiculous amount of time for like how he views the world, where he messed up and he lost control and people paid for it. But he tried to make that mistake up, but he kept making worse. And like very realistic kind of thing again is like you make one big mistake and then suddenly you just keep spiraling. That kind of shit shouldn't be held as don't understand the character, you hate the character, you're doing this because you don't like the character, you're doing this because DiDio hates Wally West, hates legacy characters. DiDio may hate Wally West. Tom King certainly doesn't, and Tom King's the one writing it. So he's doing his best with the mandate, and I feel like that is a legitimate story you can tell about the nature of reboots and stuff, rather than the fan outrage who asked for Wally but didn't want to talk about the baggage that would come with that. I think is a very good like example of why people getting so mad about these things is missing forest with the trees.
Mm-hmm. And you know, it's really interesting when the Wally West example in particular, because you know Tom King's was in the CIA. He's kind of a big veteran supporter. He did like the USO show recently. He's got into veterans, and Wally West. Oh, your hope. I'm so glad we have you back now because you're gonna make everything better. Yeah, that's a soldier's return from war story if I've ever heard one. Just saying, just throwing that one out there. That is a veteran's story if I have ever heard one. Your hope, you're gonna make everything better. These people don't fucking understand. I've been there. I've seen things. And like it's amazing to me that there's so much willingness to gloss over. And I want to touch on something that you said earlier in the episode. Well, Alfie, I almost called you Wally. That would have been sad. Which is, I think that this is a reaction I see from a lot of younger fans, and that's probably why it irks me so much, is because I got into comics when I was relatively old to do it. I started reading comics around 17 to 18, and I started weekly with Return of Bruce Wayne, which was 2010, so I would have been 19 or 20. So yeah, I got into the books pretty late for the demographics they shoot for. And so I never really... I had little bits here and there. Like, yeah, I got pissed off by Scott Snyder's Joker Endgame story, and so I made a ranty video about why it's bad and why Scott Snyder's a plagiarist, and I added him on Twitter. I got a little outragey, but here's the thing. I didn't complain that Scott Snyder is a terrible person and he hates the characters or anything. I complained that Scott Snyder is a plagiarist. And I probably should have worded it a little bit better. I probably could have been a little nicer and said, listen, man, I understand that you like Grant Morrison, but just try something more original. That's still kind of harsh, but I think that's fair. That's a lot nicer way to put what my general complaint about Scott Snyder has been. Or was. I haven't read him since New 52 ended. That'd be something I'd probably be a little bit... If I could go back, I'd change my wording a little bit. But, I've had my moments where I've kind of ventured into that, confronting creators thing. But, like, the level to which I see it, I do think it comes from a lot of younger fans. And I have no way to justify that. I have no way to know if the person behind this, image of a Green Lantern symbol or whatever is a 13-year-old or a 67-year-old man, right? I don't know. But it does seem to be the younger crowd. And you guys got into comics when you were younger. You read when you were younger. Do you think you had more of that? And like, what about it made you kind of outgrow it?
More of like outrage and Is that what you mean? Like,
yeah, more of that outrage and that like I understand this character better than this writer kind of thing.
Outrage, maybe a little. Like when I was first really getting into comics, I hand wrote letters to the comics that I read, and even some of them that I didn't read. I would handwrite letters about these characters based on knowledge I had, reading about, Howard the Duck from the 70s, and I'd be writing to the Max title of the early 2000s, knowing nothing about that book or whatever. But so I'm sure in some of the letters I wrote, I insulted the art, saying like, what is going on here? This is garbage. And I regret that. I really wish I could go back and just slap myself in the face and say, hey, this is even if you don't like it, like sometimes you can voice your opinion, but sometimes if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And this is someone this is their job. They're just trying their best. Maybe just keep it to yourself if you don't like it. As far as like me thinking I know better than the creators, I don't know if I've ever verbalized that.
I know I have. Like, it's been a very bad character trait I had to try and fight. Is I very much had like that, because it comes from insecurity. Like it comes from like in my case, I'm sure a lot of people's cases, like you don't get to do this in your regular social life. I can't be like, oh, this is why I like Spider-Man. Like this Spider-Man comics, like all these deep dives that I've read through in like my secondary school, because then the people would call me like, oh, you fucking pussy, you get out of here, like punch me in the face. Like that kind of shit would happen. And that like builds up frustration when you're at that age, because it gets to you easier because you let shit like that get to you. And so it kind of comes off, oh, here's my platform where I can finally tell the thing I have to say, and that because I know all this shit and it's going to be important. And to make it important, I'm going to go straight to the source. I'm going to really like say, I'm going to change things. My one tweet is going to make this see it, and they're going to have a revelation like, oh my God, this kid is right. I have been ruining Superman. Oh my God. It's...
Oh man, I wonder if I could get Tom King to film something like that.
I don't like legit. I would love if fucking Ben just did face cam and just read some of the shit people have been sending him about how he's ruining Superman and they want Tomasi back, and he's just like, oh my God, what have I done?
I am ruining Superman.
Tomasi, come back! And Tomasi's like, perish.
And I'll look down and whisper.
They would just all get into the act and they make this fucking like huge scene of it. I would love it. I would absolutely adore it. But it's one of those things. I'm 100% with you, because there's a lot of people younger than me or around my age that I see doing it a lot. At least from accounts I've seen, or like friends of accounts who hang around. It's like that social group. It's that RP, let's talk. Like that boon has recently got, I think, in like my like area of like age group, just because social media and Twitter is like establishes such a platform of you can interact with creators much easier than like letters with like you get a letter back in the next issue maybe, but it'd be much more impersonal because it had to be like censored and shit. You could get into an argument on Dan Slot for free. He will argue at you no matter what you do.
He is so bad about that. I think Twitter has broken that man's communication skills.
Yeah,
I think like there's so many people that come at him swinging that like I don't think you could say anything to Dan Slott. Like, Dan Slott, this story point doesn't make any sense without him just getting ready for a fight.
Uh-huh.
You know, I think that man's broken for communication because of Twitter.
But it is that kind of, it's all insecurity, and how you get past that, or how I got past that, is you just fucking grow up. And you find people who you can talk about, like, because I think a lot of it is, I want to get more involved in this community, or I have a community following, and I have a hot take that I know will get me a lot of retweets. Like I think some of the more passionate ones are just done for like bandwagon because they will come in waves. It's because like when one person says something, then suddenly everyone on the timeline is finding something to tweet at about like Heroes of Christ. Like again, the funniest thing is every single community I saw found a different panel they hated from Heroes in Crisis Confessions. And they all banded together as like a legion, and it was like I admire the synergy. It's one of those things where people do it in groups because they want to feel included, as like we are banding together for the sake of the character. But it is such an immature way to look at things, and I don't feel bad saying that because I can acknowledge that in myself, and it is something you grow past. Hopefully, it is something you should address. Because you need to grow past it to be a functional human fucking being. Because if you interact about that shit on like comic books, fuck me if you actually try to like interact in the real world with people who disagree with you on shit. Like, come on, you have to be able to recognize, like you said at the start of this, art can make you feel things other than just contentment. It could like, or like just this is good, I'm happy. Art can piss you off. Art can make you feel horrible shit for the characters. It can punish them and make you feel bad because of it. It can break your heart. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or out of character. It just means it's exploring it in a way that's different than a lot of mainstream comics aren't used to, because generally DC and Marvel don't do that kind of shit for their characters because it's not profitable long term. You can only really do it in small bursts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trying to think about where to really go with this. So, like, it is definitely something that I think a lot of people just grow past. Is there a point at which it's acceptable to just wring your fists and just start tearing apart a thing? Like, is there a point at which it's like, okay, let's just fucking rag on this creator for this choice? Like, it's not like I'd be tempted to say it's okay to rag on someone when they do something bad in real life. I mean, I fucking do that. But like, is there a point at which someone can do something with the character where it's actually okay to do that?
All right, here's my big example, which I think everyone will universally agree with. Mark Miller pitched as the next type of the death of Superman thing, the rape of Wonder Woman.
No. Did he really?
Yeah. That kind of shit.
Wow.
I'd never heard that before.
Like,
I don't
he's
like-
gone on record and passes it. Oh, I was joking. Given your track record, I don't think you were, buddy.
Yeah, I don't think that's like, even if he was joking, I don't think that makes it any better. So I think that's probably a fair enough example. Where it's like when it's just insulting and really doesn't have, when the action is definitely not worth the cost to the character, and when it's done specifically out of spite or to insult the character, and like the writer will go out or creative whatever will go out and admit that they did it because they don't like the character, I think it's okay to give them some gruff for that. Cause yeah, I never heard of that. I'm gonna have to look into that shit now, Alfie. I am fucking fascinated.
Yeah, it's there's like a whole like interview or like segments of what they were gonna plan, what the pitch was for. They were gonna treat it like Death of Superman, where it was going to be like an event they were gonna plan, and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ.
That's so ridiculous, and you know, it's funny because what I was just saying, if it's done specifically for spite or whatever. I mean, kind of Death of Superman was, right?
Yeah,
Like,
Superman's boring. He doesn't sell anymore. Let's kill him.
Well,
yeah.
well, because because the Lois and Clark TV show was starting, they were going to marry Lois and Clark in the comics. And then someone high up said, you can't do that because they want to marry him in the show at the same time they marry him in the comics. So then they took Jerry Ordway, who had jokingly for years, he had said, let's kill him. They finally said, okay, let's do it because we have to kill some time.
Right.
It cracks me up how important that story is, yet how everything around it is so goddamn haphazard. They had no idea what they were doing. You know, it's just amazing. Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. What if that was Superman's last line in that book?
Jesus, that would redeem that whole story.
Wait a minute, religious subtext in a Superman story? I don't know. That does seem...
I don't know either, Ruben. I don't know either.
No, I'm willing to give them a little bit of slack on it because they were kind of last minute told, hey, this thing you've been planning for like 2 years, you can't do it for an unknown amount of time. Because like they didn't know, what if Lois and Clark lasted 15 years and they married them in season 14? Like they were told you can't have them get married until they get married in the show. So like in that case, it's like, yeah, we got to come up with something like, so yeah, that's Death of Superman is not a good story, but I'm willing to give them slack because they were kind of last minute, had to think of something quick.
Yeah, but like the idea of just like pitching it and trying to run with like the, you know, let's break Batman's back and make it an event. Okay, let's kill Superman and make it an event. All right, let's rape Wonder Woman. Whoa, dude. It almost sounds like a fucking sketch comedy. Oh my god.
It is like legit. It's just like, again, the fact again. There's only so much shit we don't know, but there do like stories like these do pop up now and again of like things they've talked about behind the scenes that other creators have told, like said out loud. It's like, holy shit, like
yeah, like cripple the bitch.
Yeah. These guys, like, some of these fuckers really don't give a shit. Like, that whole thing of, recently NerdSync did a video on Dark Phoenix, and there's a thing in that where they talk about, oh, Jean Grey as Phoenix was going to be able to fight Silver Surfer and Thor, and she was gonna beat Silver Surfer and Thor to, like, establish how powerful she was. And the Marvel editor at the time was like, no, she's a girl. She can't beat Silver Surfer and Thor. They're the strong guys. It's like that kind of like, what, you fucking 12? Like...
She has boobs. It's an obvious weakness. That's ridiculous. And yeah, like, I guess you think about, like, the Alan Moore says, oh, can I fucking cripple Barbara Gordon and have her get shot through the spine in the middle of my story? Yeah, cripple the bitch, whatever. I'm like, damn, that is pretty fucking shitty. And it's in one of my favorite stories of all time, though. I don't know what to do with that.
Who was it that said that to Alan Moore?
Someone at DC Editorial at the time. He asked if he could, like... The amount to which Alan Moore did not want to be on The Killing Joke is... I've got this whole theory that Alan Moore knows The Killing Joke is the best thing he ever wrote, but he won't admit it because he doesn't want to admit that he wrote the greatest thing ever with pre-established characters. I really will stand by that argument. But, yeah, so... who is it? It's Dave Gibbons? No, Brian Bolland. Is offered by DC, hey, passion project. And pick any writer, pick any characters, you get to draw it. And he's like, oh, I want Alan Moore and I want to do a Joker and Batman story. And so Alan Moore just kind of gets dragged into the thing as a favor to Brian Bolland. And then he writes the greatest thing ever, and just in the process of writing, he's like, oh, can I get Barbara Gordon shot in the spine? And the DC editorial guy goes, yeah, cripple the bitch. And I'm like, God, he's doing it for the story. You just sound like you got a problem with Batgirl.
So I didn't know they'd let me do it.
So I read up on it, and apparently, according to this site, it was Lynn Wein who is the editor, but the thing about that is Alan Moore has been known to just straight up lie. Like, whenever, I don't remember who it was telling him, it was right after Crisis on Infinite Earths, they said, we're wanting to do this story that kind of wraps up the Silver Age of Superman, kind of a fun little love letter to all the past 30 years of Superman stories. And then, according to Alan Moore, he got up and like put his hands around the guy's neck and said, "You must let me write that or I will choke you to death," or something like that. And like years later, Alan Moore said, or someone said, no, that didn't actually happen. So like, I don't know if maybe this is like an exaggeration. I like to hope it's an exaggeration. I like to hope that Lin Wein didn't say that.
No, Ruben, you're wrong. That's obviously a cover-up, because we all know the only thing that can make Alan Moore go into a murderous rage is his secret love for Superman, and he's trying to hide it.
I don't know. It is kind of crazy. Yeah, so I guess there is some level where I think it's acceptable to be mad and to say, you know what, fuck this, creative. I don't like their shit, and they're doing shitty things with the characters. Even then, Superman's more real than any of us. Even people that have had a huge impact on the characters going forward, like, people will be reading All-Star Superman for decades after Grant Morrison is dead. Superman's still more real than Grant Morrison. And he's definitely more real than any of us. So at a certain point, like, even if people do shitty things to a character or things you disagree with, like Batgirl, it's gonna revert eventually. It's gonna go away. Because someone else will have the story they want to tell, and they can only use Barbara Gordon Batgirl to do it. And they don't want it to be a prequel. They want it set now, and it'll happen. It'll get there. It is, I guess, harder to take that longer view, and maybe that's where the age thing kind of comes from. You get more used to it as you see it happen more and more, so you're less shocked by the outrage that it's trying to stir. And you're just kind of, you know it's not going to last. It'll get changed a couple years down the line. And the character's ultimately going to be stronger than the Thing. I really... Yeah, we've killed Superman, but he came back. Have we done anything to a character that's just... This is never going to go away?
Yes, I have a direct example, and I can give you a reason why.
Is it Jason Todd?
No.
Okay.
Hank Pym being a wife abuser.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's never going away, and it's brought up every single time. In like every appearance Hank Pym has with the Avengers, they always find their ways like, you backhanded Janet. Like,
it's like, thanks guys, this was a really nice barbecue. It was good to get together with everyone. Anyway, I'm gonna head out. See you later. Bye Hank, see you Hank, bye Hank. You hit your wife! God damn it! I thought
it's just fucking Tony like 4 in the back. Now I've hit it, that wife. But like legit, it's because you get like Superman. Yeah, no matter what they do with him, he's probably gonna be alright. Characters like Hank Pym, who are only famous for the shit they did, like in like Identity Crisis, what's that character who like raped someone, like Dr. Light?
Dr. Light, yeah.
That shit's never going away either.
Yeah, but I mean, he also got tentacle raped by Raven in the Teen Titans animated series, and you will never convince me otherwise.
But still,
the Hank Pym thing is a fair point. But at the same time, I have 2 counterexamples. Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and MCU. Don't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a thing in the comics, and it's been dealt with so many times that I think, yeah, we're kind of past the point where we can't deal with it. But Hank Pym has been Ant-Man before and since. Like, he's had reboots, and now it's just part of his character history, which... This might be a controversial opinion, I don't know. I'm okay with a character who's supposed to be a hero kind of having that in their background. who's like struggling with this really bad thing they did at one point in their life. I'm probably not going to read a Hank Pym Ant-Man comic anyway, but conceptually I can see how that could maybe actually be an interesting thing to add flavor to the universe and deal with.
I mean, that's like Daredevil's whole thing, is all the shit he's done in different runs always just pile up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, you're Jason Todd, he's kind of defined by his death no matter what. So I think there are exceptions to it, but I think there are kind of exceptions that prove the rule. If I'm allowed to use that little out. But I think the characters are always stronger than whatever the writers, the shitty writers, the good writers will throw at them. The 90s were basically torture porn for Batman, and yet he got through it. He's better for it now. I don't think the stuff will last super long, or if it's going to last, it probably informs the character in at least an arguably interesting way and gives people ammo to go forward with. And if it is really so bad and overly insulting, we'll probably just get rid of it. Like, I think that's the thing, is no matter how bad it gets, it's comics. There's always an out. There's always that baton passing to the next guy who can undo everything in an instant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it's not comics, when it's like your favorite TV show does a thing with a character that you don't like, okay, good thing everything's based on something else nowadays. Or if it's not based on anything, if a TV show you were watching more as background noise did a really, really shitty finale that kind of eliminated the point of the entire series. Cough, cough, How I Met Your Mother, pronounced vaguely through a cough. You can just not watch the show anymore. It's like, wow, that was a really bad finale. Guess I'll move on with my life. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what point I'm trying to make. I guess I'm just saying that it affects you less as you get older. And yeah, I think Ruben kind of summed it up early on in the episode. Once you have real shit to worry about, this stuff seems rather silly. I think that's a good place to end the episode, don't you guys?
Yeah, pretty much sums everything up. Well done.
All right. Ruben, I believe it's your turn for a review topic, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Let's talk about the movie. I'm possibly going to regret it, but let's talk about the movie Sin City.
Oh, okay. All right. This should be interesting. Okay. That'll be a fun one. Everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.